Lord Jesus Christ. One time, St. John Chrysostom was in his church, and he's performing an exorcism over someone. And as he was doing this, his prayer was disturbed because there's people talking in the church, laughing and talking kind of. Which is kind of strange when someone's casting the devil, that someone would be laughing and talking. It's interesting. But these men were talking incessantly. And the holy bishop would look up at them and he would give them this look like, close your mouth, be quiet. And he would continue with the exorcism. They kept talking. Finally, St. John said, look, this devil is going to come out of this man soon. Where do you think he's going to go? Into your open mouths. Be quiet. And they immediately were silenced. They were immediately silenced. And I thought of this story because of today's gospel reading, in which the devils immediately cried to Christ saying, if you're going to throw us out, send us into the swine, please. And it's natural for us to think that demons would go into swine because demons go to unclean things. That's kind of natural. So it doesn't seem strange to us that they would go there. They would want to go there. I began to think about what the Holy Fathers say about how we give the devil rights over us. We grant him rights to enter. We give him rights to dwell near to us, to influence us. Because if you notice in the story, Satan cannot even leave the man until Christ commands him, and he cannot enter the swine without permission. And when Job is tormented by Satan, he's tormented only because God gives him permission. God never causes what Satan does. In fact, to be honest with you, God restrains pretty much 90% of what Satan would want to do. But there are moments in which Satan will come and he will say, I have rights over this man. And God will say, yes, you do. There was one time where there was a priest performing an exorcism over this woman. And as the priest, and this was in Russia, and the priest went up to her, and he began to perform the exorcism, and the demon inside yelled, you have no right to exorcise me. This woman has committed 9 abortions. You have no right to exorcise me. I'm here by right. God sent me here. I'm not leaving. And the priest was jolted by that. Pretty jolted, actually. Satan said, I have the right to be here. You can give Satan rights over you. In fact, one time St. Paisios, will tell a number of stories of him. St. Paisios one time went to this cell. He was given a cell in Mount Athos to be in the monastery. And this cell was weird. He kept having problems, serious problems. Like he would have horrendous temptations in this cell. And he began to say, this is strange. Like, I expect temptations, but this cell was really intense. What goes on in this place? Finally, he talked to some monks and they said, we had to let a layman stay in that cell one time. And this man took the holy water of theophany and dumped it all over the wall in this impious way. And so Satan has rights over this room. Because of the impiety and blasphemy of this man, Satan has the right to do weird stuff in this room. And St. Paisios said, okay, now I understand. It's not me. I understand. I understand that. There was another time where St. Paisios, when he was young, he was sent back to his hometown to labor in this monastery and to rebuild it and stuff. He was working there. And there was a woman in the village that would come up to the monastery. He was the only monk in this monastery that was in ruins. And he was fixing this monastery. There was a woman in the village who was falling into some bad things. She was fornicating a lot. She was committing great sins. And yet she would go to the monastery and she would give a show of piety. And St. Paisios was kind to her, but these other villagers would come and they say, Elder, why do you talk to this woman? This woman is corrupt. She says one thing to you, but she goes back to the village and continues to live in iniquity. She's putting on a show for you. And St. Paisios was kind of upset about this. And so the woman came back, he excoriated her, he was really harsh. He just tore into her really harshly because of her great sins and her iniquities. And the woman left in tears, very sorrowful. And all of a sudden, St. Paisios said, I had experienced the worst lust that I've ever had in my life. It was so bad. It was so horrendous. It was so terrible. He said, I couldn't escape these thoughts. These thoughts were so awful. He said, I even took a file from my carpentry shop. It was like, it was a chisel for me. But it took a chisel and he put it against his leg and he would smack with a hammer and take off a couple inches of skin just so the pain would drive away his desire. He didn't want this desire. And St. Paisios says, I did this several times until my shoe was completely full of blood. But the temptation would not abide. It would not stop. It continued with maximum intensity. And so he said, it's good to go into the forest and to be devoured by bears rather than to give into this passion. I'm going to go into the forest and see if a creature will eat me. Of course, all the creatures liked him, so they wouldn't have done anything. But he went to the forest, and as he was walking to the forest, suddenly God illumined him. And he began to think, he began to realize, what if the passion I'm having now is the passion this woman has in the town? And so she falls endlessly into sin because this is where she is. He said, oh God, have mercy. because these passions are unbearable. Lord have mercy. See, he had judged her, actually, and he realized that. He didn't realize that he had judged this woman until this moment. Suddenly he realized, Lord, I judged. I'm so sorry, forgive me, forgive me. And immediately, passion was gone. Temptation ended. So the problem is that men can give Satan rights over them. We can give him the right to enter us, and he can claim us. Now I'm not talking about possession, I'm talking about temptations. And so we have to be guarded. We have to be really, really guarded. So for example, if you begin to yield to temptation, you give Satan a kind of right over you. Like Satan flashes something in front of you, and you look at it. You know you shouldn't look, but you look anyway. Guess what? He has the right now to give you more temptation. He has the right to talk to you more. And so what happens? You likely will fall. Think about it. How many of us can say one sin begets many? You fall into one sin, you fall into many sins. Why? Because you've given Satan rights. Once he has rights, he can do more to you. He can do a lot more. So for example, if a man begins the day and some corrupt thought comes to his mind and he doesn't immediately reject it, but he kind of dwells on it a little bit, then he pushes it away. He may not have completely gone the full weight of sin, but he has opened himself up to it. And guess what? Satan will come back with more of those thoughts for the rest of the day. For the rest of the day, you'll have more thoughts like this. So for example, you are irritated. Quench it. If you don't quench it, what will happen? If you indulge in it, Satan will have rights. Then he'll come and he'll make you enraged. He'll push you all the way to rage if you don't quench it from the beginning. And the temptations will keep hitting you like a hammer. Why? Because Satan will say, he has given me the rights. I have the right to keep hitting him because he yielded. He indulged in temptation. Now I can hit him more and more and more. There was one time a monk, this was a very, very pious man. This monk was a monk of Mount Athos, but he had to go to this Metokian, this kind of satellite monastery that the monastery on Mount Athos owned, but it was in mainland Greece. So he had to leave Mount Athos and go to Greece to go to this Metokian to do some business. He was an administrator. And so he got into this bus. He was a monk, he had to ride a public bus. And so he's on this bus, and this woman sits next to him. And he doesn't look at her. He can tell it's a woman, probably from her perfume or whatever. The monk is sitting in the window seat. And horrendous temptations come saying, just look at the woman, just look at her. And the monk says, no. So for 6 hours, he has to ride the bus. He looks out the window the whole time, or he sleeps. He never looks at the woman. In fact, he's so intense that he waits until they get to their stop, and he waits until the woman gets up and walks down the aisle. Then he stands up and looks. He was that intense about this. God was so amazed with, or God was so pleased with his diligence in not even giving Satan the slightest right, that God gave him tremendous grace. He had tremendous grace because of this. And so, beloved, guard yourselves really carefully. Don't become swine. Don't open yourselves up to anything that is swine-like, because Satan will then enter. He'll use it. He'll use anything you give to him for maximum effect. St. Joseph the Hesychist says, what you don't offer to God, Satan takes. The time you don't offer to God, Satan takes it. For idol, Satan takes it. He takes anything that we don't give to God. And so be really careful. Be really careful you don't give him rights. The thing about it is that in justice, he will go and he'll say to God, God, look, the man didn't choose you. He chose to look at sin. So therefore, I have the right to say more. And that's why God will say, yes, he chose you. I guess you have rights. He does. But see, if a man confesses, what happens? It's all gone. Satan loses all his rights. When a man makes confession, he confesses his sins with humility before God, Satan loses all his rights. He doesn't have rights anymore. This is why Satan is always telling people, don't confess too much. Don't confess often. Please don't. Because he loses his rights. As long as he has rights on you, as long as you have unconfessed sins, he can keep talking to you. And he can keep hitting you. And he can keep hammering you. And he can keep doing evil things to you. Because you give him the right to do it. But when a man makes confession, it's gone. And sometimes it's not even confession to a priest. Sometimes it's just speaking openly. Like there was a priest in Mount Athos who was very, very pious. And he had to go perform unction in this cell. He had to do this mystery of unction, which is very intense, has a lot of things in it. And when he got back to his cell, Satan tormented him with this thought. Oh, you forgot to pour the oil correctly. Or you forgot something in the service. Like you've invalidated the service by forgetting to do something right. The monk just turned, the priest turned to a man who was just a monk, and he confessed the thoughts to him and said, I'm bothered by these thoughts. And the monk turned to him and said, oh, Father, you shouldn't care. You do this so much, you do these services so much, you just did it from memory. It was all gone. The temptation was gone. This was not even confession to a priest, just confession in general. By being humble, what happened? All the thoughts were dispersed. And so, beloved, be careful, be diligent. But who can be diligent completely? We cannot be. So that's why we need humility. That's why we need to be very humble. That's why we need to continually turn to Christ, because Christ is so close. See, in this passage of the gospel, Satan is inside these men, but Christ is also so close. We can give Satan rights, or we can give Christ rights. The more we turn to Christ, the more we look at him, the more we give him authority over us. And that's called grace. That God puts his grace into us. And when his grace abides in us, then we are given the power to do more good. Beloved, when you have no grace, you know it. When you have no grace, everything is impossible. You can't even lift up your head. Saying one prayer is like a massive drudgery. It's massively hard. To even lift your Bible, it's like it's too heavy to lift. But if you have grace, everything's easy. Everything is really easy. And so you've given God rights. You've given him the rights to offer you things. And so abide in grace. Don't abide with Satan. Don't give Satan any rights over you. Don't be like swine. Don't open yourselves up to him. Don't talk in church, because he might go into you there. Be careful. Be guarded. Be guarded. And open your heart to Christ. His love cannot even be remotely understood. Like the wounds he suffered on the cross, that's nothing. His love is so far beyond this. If he had been forced to die 50 times, he would have done it. 1,000 times, even more. His one death was sufficient. All the wounds that he suffered do not even begin to demonstrate his love. And so you can choose to abide in this love, or you can choose to abide elsewhere, but you should abide always in his love. And he will set you free, like he set the Gergesene men free from the demons. Amen.